Congratulations on the fall of the House of Usher. This is absolutely fantastic.
It was really fun. It was just sort of came out of the blue, and in fact, I wish I'd got the background that you got. I mean, you got the tremendous back. I've got, it's just my house. But yeah, it was just a sort of a bolt from the blue, and Mike called me, and I read it, and I just went, oh my, this is amazing. What luxury. So and we're going to work with Carl again, and Mike Fimignari, and Trevor Macy. It was just because I did Gerald's Game with them,
Right.
and then I did get to play also. I was in The Haunting of Hill House. I'm not sure if you know.
Yes.
Yeah, so ghost number 47, I think it was. And in fact, that's how Mike introduced me when I got to the set. He goes, I have every confidence in Bruce, because after all, he did a tremendous job with ghost number 47 and The Haunting of Hill House. But the dialogue was just so great, and the subject matter so resonant. And
Well, my question to you is, and obviously we don't want to get into the reason how you got this gig, but I wanted to know, when you did land the gig, did you feel any pressure coming into a situation like that, with all the dialogue, with all the stuff that happened in the past, scenes to shoot, reshooting scenes from the previous actor? Did you feel any pressure?
yeah, just not in terms of the reshooting, just in terms of the sheer volume of stuff that had to be absorbed in short order. And yeah, I hit the grindstone pretty hard most times, but never like this. Just every waking moment, right? Just learning stuff, and strangely, it all seemed to sort of, it'd end up in RAM, and I'd do it on the day, and then the next day it would be gone and just supplanted by something, by the next scene that was coming in. It was, I was drinking from a fire hose.
So for people who, unfortunately, if they have not seen it yet, shame on them. But for people who haven't seen the show yet, can you talk about your character, Roderick Usher?
Well, Usher is one of those people who, as a young man, has dreams of sort of doing the right thing, and then his demons get the better of him, and he makes a bargain with the devil, basically. And like all of us who make bargains at some point, where we hope never to have that favor called in. The favor gets called in, and it's a high price.
I was thinking to myself when I was watching this series, would I take that deal when he took that deal with his sister? And I'm thinking to myself, would I take that deal? And I watched the series with a group of friends. And some said yes, some said no. And myself and a couple of people we couldn't answer that question. So if Bruce Greenwood was offered that deal, how would you think you would react to that deal?
Well, I think that the tell is that he's offered the deal. He has children already. So that to me is the tell, that his better nature was not his predominant characteristic. There was some fundamental need to serve his ego. And in terms of would I take that deal? I mean, I'd like to say no, but
but
I've never been offered that kind of thing. I'm sure I've been offered other circumstances where you're at some point there's going to be a prize.
Right. Absolutely. Throughout this series, there are some interesting relationships for me that stood out. And the first one is the one between Roderick and, I hope I'm saying this right, Dupin, played by Carl Lumbly. Can you first of all talk about that relationship, and then talk about working with Carl? Because you two in those scenes were just pure gold.
Well, he's such a great guy. And, as you alluded to, I was feeling a lot of pressure, and all those first 2 weeks were all just him and me in the chairs. So it was all those monologues, but the beautiful thing was just one guy, nothing, one other person, nothing to to I just had to concentrate on him. And the first day we were working together, we met the day before and we talked a little bit, and he's just such a sweet man. And the day we started to shoot, we just took a second and just sort of, looked at each other for a minute, and just, without saying anything, it was implied that I've got your back, and let's just roll and see what happens, and I think he was no doubt, he was aware of how much pressure I was feeling, because I don't think I couldn't really hide it. I was sort of wired and nervous and all those things that keep you awake in the middle of the night. And I think he sensed that, and he has this preternatural calm about him anyway.
Yeah.
And so he was a huge safety net for me.
The other one that stands out for me, and again, these scenes were just amazing to watch, is the work you did with Mary McDonald. The Madeline Usher character was such a force of nature in this series. And again, talk about working with her and playing that character, playing alongside that character.
Well, it was, we met on, we didn't have rehearsals or anything like that. So we just met on the day and tried to.
No rehearsals.
Well, no, there wasn't really time for that.
Wow.
I met with Carl a couple of times on the Sunday before we began, and on the following weekend. But there wasn't really. We were 5 o'clock in the morning. We were in the chairs working, and but Mary was super, super generous too. Just really, really welcoming, and there's a weird kind of polarity there that we found right away, and I'm not sure what to attribute it to, but there was a sense that there was some kind of there was a sort of a dynamic there that was magnetic and moving.
Do you see Roderick Usher as an evil person, or do you see him as a character that kind of lives in the gray area? If that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense for him to say he lives in a gray area.
Yeah.
And on his more on his less lucid days, to say, look, I'm just doing what people want. I'm just giving them what they want. I didn't invent it. I just presented it. I'm a middleman, like he says in the movie. But no, he's evil. It's because he says at the end, he says, here's the real giveaway is I knew the whole time that I was going to climb to the top on a pile of corpses. And if that's not evil, I don't know what is. And doesn't mean he can't do it with a certain degree of charm, but no, black heart.
That's the thing about the character and the way you play this character. He has this charm and this swagger to him. And although you want to hate him, at the same time, you're just like, this guy is just so damn cool.
He loves his life, man. He loves his life. And that's contagious, right? That's those, the people who, like cult leaders, and their charisma is part of their charisma is that joy of living, and Roderick Usher just drank every drop of that, because they talk about how many women he went through, and there's that tremendous monologue where where he's being, there's a monologue somewhere about how all the women he went through, he just was rolling through them one after the other, and if the kids resulted, it's fine, whatever, I'll handle it, I'll pay for it, I'll underwrite it, and they've got my blood, I'll let him in and try him out, and I'll give him every chance in the world, just
I'm curious to know, what do you think about when it comes to him and feeling true love? Now, this is my perspective.
Hmm.
I can think of two times that it seemed to me that he actually felt true love. One was in the beginning with his first wife,
Hmm.
and the second was the love he had for his granddaughter,
Hmm. Yeah, I
Lenore.
think
Would you agree with that?
there's. Yeah, I would. I think, and Zach Gilford had this tremendous ability to play both sides of the fence, where his love for his child and for his wife was complete and informed by all the poetry that he would just extemporaneously come up with. Um, and then at the same time, his uglier nature allowing himself to be swayed by his very persuasive sister. And and you know, I perhaps he's one of those Roderick's kind of one of those people who, like all of us, have in our most generous moments, there's something that's undeniable and unassailable and worthy, and I think I think there was a connection there between he and his children, and he and his daughter, and his granddaughter. Um, and in a way, it's not necessarily for me to figure out what the what that mix of colors is, as much as it is to play that completely and see what it ends up looking like, you know. So it's for me to have defined that for myself in terms of how much of a how much of a redeemable soul did he have in there, and is that evinced by his love for his granddaughter and his initial love for his wife and his original children? Does that is there some excuse built in there because that love was real? Um, that's that's not for me to essay, right? For me, as just trying to find that character, was just be um, sincere with that affection, be sincere with that love, and then sit back and see what that looks like. I'm sure Mike has a much more coherent answer to that. But in terms of like my responsibility, it was just lean into that love and see what it does for you. And for me, it felt in those moments, it felt tragic,
Yeah.
because you think this is a guy who gave up something that was real. He gave up something that still exists in some tiny dim spark in the recesses of his soul, that's still there, and he lets it light up a little bit, and then it gets closed over by his avarice and greed and pride and ego. And
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
does that answer your question?
It absolutely
Yeah.
does. Yes. Yes. You kind of said what I was kind of thinking when I first watched the show. And I just felt bad because I knew he had that love in him.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it with his wife and his first kid, his two kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was there. And it's just sad to see how he turned out, knowing that it's there, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. But it's also, you know, he was under the thrall, in spite of his failings, his ethical failings, and he was in the thrall of a tremendously persuasive sister.
Yes.
Right?
Tremendously is the correct word.
And you can talk about that love too, because you know at the end when she's giving that monologue, after that tremendous monologue that Mary gives, um, about the Supreme Court and all that, right?
Yes.
After I've drugged her, after Roderick's drugged her, he's just full of love for her, right? And full of respect for how bald her appraisal of the world is, and how she is absolutely who she is.
No apologies.
No apologies. And he tries to do that, because she says, do you think you would have done it differently? And he goes, I was who I was.
Yeah.
So sidesteps the question in a way, and in another way tries to mimic who she is, because she is unapologetically herself and herself only.
Yes.
There's no she doesn't wonder where she's going to land, and Roderick fights with it until he gets into the courtroom.
Right. The Verna character I found fascinating as well, and Carla was just tremendous with this character. Fans have their theories of who or what this character is. What are your thoughts about this character? Some people think it's supernatural. There are some lines she made about the one in particular stands out about shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, a former client of hers. I just had to laugh out loud at that.
Yeah.
What do you think about this character?
It's conscience. So I think it's your conscience, and you make a deal with, you can fabricate a figure to come in and talk to you and make these offers to you, but ultimately it's your own conscience. So, and if you look at it that way, it means that we're all in this position of being offered ways to move forward that crushes our better nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's the devil. It's the devil on your shoulder, and the devil on your shoulder he's not a literal devil. He's all yours.
Yes. There's a line in the series that I actually wrote down, and I'm so glad I got to ask you about this. And I'm curious to get your answer. I think it was Frederick Usher who said this. He said, "If you don't want to be consistently cruel, then you have to be sufficiently brutal." Do you remember that line? And what do you think about that line?
Yeah. Well, it's
it stuck with me for some reason. I had to write it down.
Yeah. Well, Henry Thomas is he's such a talented guy, and he found this very, very funny perspective on Roderick, and I think, did he not, was that not something that he had heard from somebody, or was that something that, I can't remember whether that he made that up, that character made that out of whole cloth or not. But it's that moment. Well, it was also the context in which he said it, right?
Mm-hmm.
When his wife is lying there in the bed and he's got the pliers. Maybe it's one of those things where you say something like, after choking somebody, you say, I needed to get your attention. It's just such, this whole family is so full of, overkill is their middle name, right? They just drive through every single obstacle. And maybe they all have a genetic predisposition to do that. And that would be Roderick's fault.
Yes. One of my final
questions. That tremendous speech that Annabelle gives at the end, where she says, I thought you were rich, but now I see the poverty in you. It's this cavernous, bottomless poverty. And I found that really, really kind of, I don't know. There's every moment I was on the set, it was one of those things where you're just pinching yourself, going, I can't believe I get to play in this arena with this kind of dialogue, and with these people, and with these characters that are so distinct and electric.
And you are so correct. Throughout these 8 episodes, I think it is, the monologues that some of you guys got to say on screen, Mike's writing is just phenomenal.
Well, and also the thing about it is he'll just, you'll start a monologue and he'll just He's not going to cut away. He's not going to cut away. He's going to come right in, and that's there's pressure, but there's also a freedom to that, because you kind of, you can just flow with it the way you want, and if he's not digging the flow, he'll do it again until he likes the flow, and he's not saying kind of do it and I can manufacture it later in editing. He's going, here, I gave you this thing, now do with it what you will.
Right.
But it's a thing, and I want you to, and everybody, all the actors are just so enamored of his dialogue. I mean, you talk to any actor who's ever worked with him, and that's one of the first things I'm sure they'll tell you.
One of the comments I read, one of my final questions for you, one of the comments I read from Flanagan said that each member of the Ushers is like a different instrument, and Verna is like the symphony. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, and she's also the conductor too, right? She's but she's a reminder that that we have a life that's full of opportunities to do good, and to give, or to do something else, and to take. And taking seems to be has been taking the day recently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Faust would tell you it's been ever thus, right?
Right. I hope this question makes sense. Watching this series, it seems to me like these characters are like walking this thin line between, I want to say, madness and sanity, maybe. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say there? Mm-hmm. And they end up paying this big price, they pay the big cost at the end anyway.
Yeah, and that's also made even more complicated by the fact in Roderick's case, he doesn't know whether what he's seeing is the world as it is, which is freaky and crazy, or whether he's losing his mind. And either way, it's bad news, right? And that was one of the things Mike said to me early on. He goes, yeah, one of the thing that terrifies him is he doesn't, if he's all this crazy stuff that's happening with his children dying in these most bizarre, convoluted, horrifying ways, if that's what's happening in the world, and there is a woman out there, a creature, a person, an image, a ghost, if that's real, that's terrifying. And if that's all a function of my dementia, it's equally terrifying. So either way, whichever way Roderick's coin is going to land, it's, there's tails on both sides. It ain't gonna end up, it ain't gonna end well.
That's a great way of putting it. There's tails on both sides. And finally,
or it's one of those things where you flip the coin and you see it rotating and flashing in the sun, and it lands on its edge.
And I don't even know if you can answer this question, but the final question I have for you is, if there's any message you want viewers to take away from watching this series, what would it be, if any?
Oh no, I'm not going to impose a message. I would never impose. That's way too confining, because everybody's going to feel differently about it. And my suggestion would be, expect that you and whoever you're watching it with are going to feel differently about X, Y, and Z, and make that the jumping off point for the violent disagreements, and or whatever make it a jumping off point for discussion.